I was heading out to listen to my son's last testament when a neighbor dashed over and yelled, "Don't turn on the ignition." He revealed the horrifying reality about my son's wife. His revelation made my blood run cold. Yet when I eventually reached the reading of the will, she collapsed at the sight of me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Seth, don't start that engine. My fingers halted on the car door handle. Garrett's warning sliced through the serene morning atmosphere like a blade through fine fabric. I spun around to spot my neighbor racing over his impeccably trimmed grass, clad in his robe and house shoes, fear carved into his lined features. I'd been straightening my dark necktie in the side mirror just seconds earlier, steeling myself for the testament unveiling. Martin's testament, my boy's concluding message to the living. The somber outfit weighed on me like protective gear for a conflict I'd never chosen. "What's the matter, Garrett?" I retreated from the vehicle, keys shaking faintly in my grasp. He arrived at my driveway, panting heavily. "Around 11:30 last night, I caught sight of Helen near your automobile. She was using tools, tinkering beneath the bonnet for a solid quarter hour." His ex-cop senses were in overdrive. When she noticed me peering from my upstairs window, she banged the hood down and bolted. The garage abruptly seemed chillier. Helen, my son's spouse, the lady poised to claim $40 million today if her scheme succeeded. I eyed my sedan, the dependable ride I'd used for 8 years without issue. "You're positive it was Helen?" "Without a doubt. She left her BMW on the road, avoiding your driveway. Calculated secrecy." Garrett's gaze sharpened. "Seth, I've investigated enough crime spots to recognize trouble. Avoid driving until you have that vehicle inspected." I circled the car deliberately, scanning the outside. No visible marks or harm. But Helen was no fool. She'd been wed to my clever son long enough to master exacting tasks. The early sunlight poured through the garage entrance, highlighting specks of dust swirling like small observers to whatever had occurred in the shadows. Birds sang in the oak trees along our tranquil suburban road, unaware of the lethal plot brewing under their boughs. My technical brain started assessing options. Brake conduits, control linkages, motor interference. Any could trigger a deadly crash on the route to central Chicago. A mishap that would position Helen as the lone heir to Martin's digital protection empire. "Thanks, Garrett. You might have preserved my existence." He dipped his head solemnly. "What's your plan now?" I retrieved my phone with firm hands, navigating to Tom Riley's contact. If anyone could uncover signs of meddling, it was him. 2 decades in car repair and a keen eye matching a crime scene expert. "I'm contacting my auto specialist for a thorough check." I held Garrett's worried stare. If Helen believes she can remove the single barrier to Martin's fortune, she's in for a rude awakening. The device warmed in my hand as I readied to call. Whatever Helen had inflicted on my car, I'd uncover evidence and then I'd ensure righteousness triumphed, not merely for my well-being but for my boy's legacy. Tom picked up after 2 rings. "Riley's Auto, Tom here." "Tom, Seth Jordan speaking. I require you at my place right away. I think my car's been tampered with." A brief silence. "That's grave, Seth. Leave it alone. I'll arrive in 15 with my complete analysis gear." I ended the call and started striding back and forth in the garage, my polished shoes tapping on the cement surface. 15 minutes to bide. 15 minutes to scrutinize every part of my sedan without altering possible clues. The vehicle rested harmlessly in the subdued garage glow, its navy finish shining. How often had I done standard upkeep right here? Swapped lubricants, switched wheels, renewed filters. Now it could be concealing a mechanism meant to end me. Helen's image surged in my thoughts. Her flawlessly done cosmetics at Martin's burial. Weeping that appeared more staged than sincere sorrow. She'd adopted my son's allure, but none of his honor. 40 million was a compelling reason for homicide. I glanced at my timepiece. 10 minutes left. The roar of a diesel motor approaching my driveway broke my reverie. Tom's work truck, emblazoned with Riley's Automotive Honest Service, reasonable rates in vivid green script, stopped behind my sedan. Tom stepped out toting a hefty toolkit, his Irish brogue heavy with worry. "All right, Seth? Fill me in as I prepare." My neighbor observed my son's wife interfering with this car last evening. "She's the main recipient of a large estate, and I'm the last hurdle." Tom's face shadowed as he engaged the hydraulic hoist in my garage floor. "Money drives folks to awful deeds. Let's uncover what's amiss." The sedan ascended gradually, exposing its underside like a subject on a surgical slab. Tom seized a strong beam light and commenced his systematic review. Beginning with the braking setup. Someone's interfered here. His tone held a sharp expertise I'd not encountered prior. These incisions on the brake conduits, they're neat, exact, not random harm from street junk. I bent nearer, peering at the parts he lit up. How do you know? 20 years in the trade, Seth. Normal deterioration yields ragged borders, unraveling. This is intentional, precise slices meant to give way slowly. He followed the compromised lines with his digit, cautious not to shift them. The perpetrator understands vehicle mechanics. The slices are placed to trigger total brake loss after a few miles. My veins iced. A few miles would place me on the freeway, speeding at 70 toward central Chicago. No stopping power at that velocity equaled sure demise. Expert job then? Definitely. And there's additional. Tom shifted to inspect the guidance elements. Slackened tie rod connections here. Your handling would grow progressively erratic while driving. The elements aligned with alarming precision. Helen hadn't just sought my death. She'd aimed for it to seem incidental. A sorrowful mechanical breakdown taking an aging man's life amid mourning his son. I drew out my phone to summon a cab. Tom, proceed with your assessment and record all. I need images of every issue. This proof must go to authorities promptly. I have a testament session to join. Helen anticipates my demise en route. Instead, I'll observe her expression when I enter that meeting space. The cab arrived as Tom completed snapping photos of the interference proof. I climbed into the rear, portfolio in tow, my formal garb now resembling combat gear. Central Law Office on LaSalle Street, I instructed the driver, giving the precise location. Crucial gathering. He eyed me in the mirror as we departed my residential area, the most vital of my existence. As we moved from calm neighborhood lanes to bustling urban routes, I permitted myself to absorb the entire extent of Helen's scheme. She'd plotted it all. The schedule, the approach, the facade of mishap. $40 million signified liberation from monetary concerns for generations. Martin had constructed his cyber defense firm from scratch, inventing groundbreaking programs that shielded big businesses from online assaults. Financial institutions, medical networks, official suppliers, they all depended on my boy's creations. In 5 years, he'd evolved from a battling startup owner to a wealthy magnate. The paradox struck me. Martin had devoted his days to safeguarding others from virtual perils, never imagining the ultimate threat would emerge from his own marital partner. Congestion increased as we neared the Chicago core. Steel skyscrapers reached for overcast skies, their panes mirroring the dawn rays like countless observers tracking our advance. The cab wove amid cargo vans and daily commuters, each distance drawing me nearer to showdown. Helen would be positioned in that meeting area presently, likely glancing at her timepiece, pondering my delay. In her thoughts, I ought to be perishing in mangled steel on a roadway, paving her way to unchallenged riches. 40 million, I murmured inwardly, sufficient to slay for. But she'd misjudged the strength of community ties. Garrett's alertness had rescued me and unveiled her lethal aim. Now, rather than claiming it all, she'd confront reckoning for attempted killing. The cab veered onto LaSalle Street, aiming for the shining edifice containing Reynolds, Mitchell, and partners. Through the glass, I spotted other suited individuals accessing the structure. Attorneys, managers, folks whose worlds spun on wealth and influence. Martin had stood apart. Even as his assets expanded, he'd stayed humble, dropping by often, conveying his enthusiasm for fresh defense measures and customer victories. He'd toiled 18-hour shifts, not out of avarice, but true zeal for shielding people. Helen had never grasped that motivation. She perceived only the monetary perks, upscale eateries, opulent trips, high-end attire. When Martin fell sick, her worry had been theatrical, her mourning strategic. Here you go, sir. That's $43. I passed him 50 and alighted on the pavement, gazing up at the formidable building ahead. Somewhere within, Helen awaited, assured of her plot's victory. She was on the verge of learning that Seth Jordan wasn't so readily dispatched. Striding through the rotating entrance, I sensed my son's essence like a steadying touch on my arm. Today, fairness would win out. Today, Martin's heritage would be defended from the lady who'd violated his faith and endangered his dad's existence. The lift doors parted before me like portals to a war zone I was at last prepared to face. Downtown Chicago loomed around the taxi like a forest of stone, each mirrored spire catching shards of morning glow. I sank further into the faded leather cushion, extracting my phone to examine the health files I'd captured digitally weeks prior. Martin's medical history painted a troubling picture. March 28th, initial report of exhaustion and abdominal unease. April the 2nd, intense vomiting. Swift shedding of pounds. April 18th, deceased. 3 weeks. Robust 42-year-old males didn't just deteriorate in 3 weeks. I paged through the timeline, my technical intellect noting discrepancies. Martin had always been meticulous about his health. Regular checkups, exercise routine, preventive care. The medical timeline made no sense. Unknown gastrointestinal complications. The death certificate read unknown, as if modern medicine couldn't identify what killed a previously healthy man in the prime of his life. Helen had controlled every aspect of his medical care. She'd insisted on specific doctors, private treatment facilities, limited visiting hours. Even I, his father, had been restricted to brief, supervised visits during his final days. My phone buzzed with a text message from that final week. "Dad, if something happens to me, be careful with Helen." I dismissed it as morphine-induced paranoia. Terminal patients often developed suspicious thoughts about caregivers. But now, with brake lines severed in my garage, Martin's warning carried deadly weight. The taxi wove through downtown traffic, passing familiar landmarks that seemed foreign now. Everything looked different when viewed through the lens of murder. Martin's cybersecurity company had made him wealthy beyond imagination. Government contracts, banking security, healthcare protection systems. His software safeguarded billions of dollars in digital assets. Helen had married into that fortune, but she'd never understood the work behind it. To her, Martin was a money-generating machine, not a brilliant innovator protecting people from digital predators. When that machine showed signs of breaking down, she'd simply expedited the process. The medical records revealed another troubling pattern. Martin's regular physician had been mysteriously unavailable during the critical period. Helen had insisted on a replacement doctor, someone with impressive credentials but no previous relationship with my son. Experimental treatment, she had called it. Cutting-edge therapy for rare conditions. Cutting-edge therapy that had accelerated his decline rather than stopping it. I closed the medical files and stared out at the approaching law firm building. Somewhere in that tower, Helen was waiting to collect her reward for 3 weeks of careful poisoning, followed by attempted murder of the primary witness. She'd underestimated the bonds of neighborhood friendship and a father's determination to protect his son's legacy. Today, her calculated plan would unravel in the most public way possible. The taxi slowed as we approached the gleaming office tower. Time to face the woman who'd killed my son and tried to kill me. Time to ensure justice prevailed over greed. Martin's final warning echoed in my mind as I prepared to exit the vehicle. This time I was listening. The elevator carried me to the 47th floor with mechanical precision, each ascending floor marking another step toward confrontation. Reynolds Mitchell and Associates occupied prime real estate. Panoramic views of Lake Michigan through Floridado ceiling windows, marble floors that reflected expensive lighting fixtures, leather furniture that whispered of wealth and power. Helen sat in a burgundy armchair near the reception desk, casually flipping through a luxury lifestyle magazine. She wore a black designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves that framed her carefully made-up face. She looked up as I approached, and I watched the color drain from her features like water from a broken glass. The magazine slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the marble floor. "Hello, Helen?" I kept my voice level, professional, surprised to see me alive. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly before she managed to speak. "Seth, I thought you weren't coming." "Really, that's interesting." I moved closer, noting how her hands trembled as she gripped the chair arms. "Why would you think that?" "Perhaps because of what you were doing by my car last night around 11:30. "I don't know what you're talking about." The words came out too quickly, too sharp. Guilty people always protested too much. "Garrett saw everything, Helen. The tools you brought, the time you spent working under my hood, the way you ran when you spotted him watching from his window." She stood abruptly, trying to use height to regain psychological advantage. "That's ridiculous. Why would I?" "The same reason you killed my son." The accusation hung in the air between us like a blade. Helen's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath the widow's grief performance. Other clients moved through the reception area, their conversations creating a background hum that provided cover for our deadly serious exchange. The professional setting constrained us both. No dramatic confrontations in this temple of legal propriety. "You're obviously distraught," Helen said, recovering her composure with practiced ease. "Grief can make people imagine things that aren't there. Can it make brake lines cut themselves? Can it cause steering components to mysteriously loosen overnight?" Her jaw tightened. "I have no idea what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts documented by a professional mechanic with 20 years of experience. Helen's eyes darted toward the conference room where the will reading would take place, then back to me. I could see her mind working, calculating new angles of attack. You know what your problem is, Seth? Her voice turned venomous. You never accepted that Martin chose me over your narrow little world. He loved me, not you. He warned me about you before he died. I should have listened. He was delirious from medication. Terminal patients say all sorts of things. The receptionist glanced in our direction, sensing tension despite our lowered voices. Helen noticed and forced a smile, playing the role of grieving widow, meeting with concerned father-in-law, but I could see the calculation in her eyes, the predatory assessment of how much damage this confrontation might cause to her plans. She was already planning her next move, ready to deploy whatever weapons remained in her arsenal. The conference room beckoned behind frosted glass doors where lawyers waited with documents that would determine the distribution of $40 million. Helen thought she knew how this story ended. She was about to discover how wrong she could be. Helen moved toward the panoramic windows overlooking Lake Michigan, using the spectacular view as a backdrop for what she clearly believed would be her moment of triumph. The morning sun cast long shadows across the reception area, and she positioned herself where the light would frame her like a portrait of victory. You know what, Seth? Her voice carried a confidence that bordered on arrogance. None of this matters. Martin left me everything. $40 million. Every single penny. She turned to face me. Her expression transformed from defensive fear to cold satisfaction. And you get absolutely nothing. We'll see about that. Oh, I've already seen. Helen's smile turned predatory. I was his wife. I took care of him through sickness and health for better or worse until death did us part. Yes, you took care of him very thoroughly. The barb rolled off her like water from expensive silk. She was too intoxicated by anticipated wealth to register the accusation's full meaning. I have lawyers, Seth. The best money can buy. You can contest this with all you want. But spousal inheritance rights are absolute in Illinois. She gestured toward the lake view as if it already belonged to her. Do you see that penthouse development on the shoreline? I've already placed a deposit on the corner unit. The casual revelation of her spending plan struck me like a physical blow. Martin wasn't even buried weeks and she was already shopping for luxury real estate with his money. $1 million buys a lot of freedom, she continued, warming to her topic. Travel, shopping, the finest restaurants. I'll finally live the life I deserve instead of playing nursemaid to a sick man. Her words revealed the depth of her callousness. No grief for a lost husband, no acknowledgement of a life cut short, only materialistic calculations about how to spend blood money most efficiently. Martin worked 18-hour days building that company. I said quietly. He revolutionized cybersecurity, protected millions of people from digital threats. That fortune represents years of innovation and dedication, and now it's mine. Helen's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who believed she'd outmaneuvered everyone around her. You always disapproved of me, Seth. Thought I wasn't good enough for your precious son. Well, guess what? I win. Other clients in the reception area began taking notice of our conversation, though Helen seemed oblivious to the attention. Her anticipated victory had made her reckless, willing to display her true nature in public. You have no idea what Martin was really worth, do you? I asked. $40 million. I know exactly what he was worth. And I have truth, Helen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Truth doesn't pay for penthouse apartments or European vacations. Money does, and in about 10 minutes I'll have all the money I could ever need. She moved closer, lowering her voice to a whisper meant only for me. You want to know a secret, Seth? Martin never loved you as much as you think. He complained about your interference constantly. Said you were a bitter old man who couldn't accept that he'd moved on with his life. The lie was designed to wound, to break my spirit before the final legal blow. But Helen had miscalculated. Instead of devastating me, her cruelty only strengthened my resolve. Mrs. Jordan. Mr. Jordan. The receptionist's voice cut through our confrontation. Mr. Reynolds is ready for you in conference room. A. Helen straightened her designer dress and checked her reflection in the window. Time for the main event. She walked toward the conference room with the confident stride of someone absolutely certain of victory. Her expensive heels clicked against marble floors like a countdown to triumph. I followed at a measured pace, my own steps steady and deliberate. Helen believed she was walking toward wealth and freedom. She was actually walking toward the complete destruction of everything she'd schemed to achieve. Mrs. Jordan. Mr. Jordan. The receptionist gestured toward a mahogany door marked with brass nameplate reading Edward Reynolds, senior partner. Please follow me. Edward's private office commanded an impressive view of Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. Leather-bound legal volumes lined the walls, and his massive desk bore the weight of what appeared to be substantial documentation. He stood as we entered, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. Please take seats at the conference table. Edward's voice carried the measured authority of someone who'd overseen countless estate readings. Before we begin, I must verify identities and review the proper legal protocols. Helen chose the chair facing the window, positioning herself where the natural light would frame her expected moment of triumph. I sat across from her, noting how she had arranged her designer purse and removed her smartphone, apparently preparing to document her windfall. The last will and testament of Martin Jordan, properly executed and notarized on April 1, 2025. Edward opened an official-looking folder with practiced precision. All legal requirements have been satisfied, including 3 independent witnesses and state certification. April 1st, 2 weeks before Martin's death, he'd been weak but mentally sharp, still capable of making crucial decisions about his legacy. Martin was very specific about his intentions. Edward continued, adjusting his reading glasses. He wanted to ensure his father's welfare above all other considerations. Helen's confident smile never wavered. She probably assumed this meant a generous provision for my retirement, while she claimed the bulk of the estate. I quote directly from the document. I hereby leave my entire estate valued at approximately $40 million, including all assets, properties, investments, and business holdings to my father, Seth Jordan, in recognition of his lifelong guidance and support. The words hit Helen like a physical blow. Her face went ashen, and she gripped the edge of the conference table as if the room had suddenly tilted. What? The word escaped her lips as barely a whisper. That's impossible. Edward continued reading with professional detachment. Furthermore, Martin included a personal addendum to be shared specifically with you, Seth. He withdrew a sealed envelope from the folder. In his own handwriting, Dad, be careful with Helen. I believe she may try to harm you to claim the inheritance. Trust your instincts about her true nature. The letter trembled in my hands as I read my son's final warning. He'd known. Despite his illness, despite Helen's careful performance, Martin had seen through her facade and taken steps to protect me. Helen stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. This can't be legal. I am his wife. Spousal inheritance rights are superseded by properly executed testamentary documents, Edward interrupted calmly. Illinois law permits testators to distribute their estates according to their wishes, provided all legal requirements are met. But $40 million, Helen's voice cracked with disbelief, goes entirely to Mr. Seth Jordan, as clearly specified in multiple places throughout the document. I watched Helen's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. All her scheming, her calculated kindness during Martin's illness, her murderous plans all rendered meaningless by my son's foresight and love. Martin had seen her true nature and protected me from beyond the grave. Helen's hands shook as she reached toward the documents, as if touching them might change their content. Helen's shock crystallized into pure rage. She shot up from her chair so violently it toppled backward, clattering against the polished hardwood floor. This is impossible. Her voice rose to a near shriek. The will is forged. I'll prove it. Edward remained seated, his calm professionalism a stark contrast to her hysteria. The document was notarized and witnessed by 3 independent parties, including Martin's personal physician and longtime business associate. I don't care. Helen lunged across the conference table, her manicured fingers clawing toward the legal documents. Give me those papers. Edward smoothly gathered the documents and moved them beyond her reach. Mrs. Jordan, please compose yourself. These are certified copies. The originals are secured in our vault. Helen's facade had completely shattered. Gone was the grieving widow, the concerned wife, the charming socialite. What remained was a desperate woman whose carefully laid plans had exploded in her face. I'll contest this will. You'll never see a penny of that money. She whirled to face me, her eyes blazing with fury. I spent 3 years married to your pathetic son. I earned that inheritance, earned it. I stood slowly, my voice deadly quiet, by poisoning him. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Helen's face went white, then flushed crimson as rage overtook shock. You can't prove anything. Martin was sick. Healthy men don't die in 3 weeks from unknown complications. I moved closer, watching her back toward the window. But you knew that, didn't you? You knew exactly what you were giving him. Helen grabbed for the documents again, this time managing to snatch one page before Edward could stop her. She began tearing at it frantically, but the heavy legal paper resisted her efforts. "This won't change anything," Edward said calmly, reaching for his desk phone. "As I mentioned, these are copies." "I want those originals," Helen screamed, throwing the torn fragments at my feet. "I want every copy destroyed." "Security?" "Yes, this is Edward Reynolds in conference room A. I need assistance with an unstable client." Helen spun toward the door as if planning to escape, then back to the windows, trapped like a caged animal. The wealthy widow persona had been replaced by something feral and desperate. "You think you've won?" She pointed a trembling finger at me. "I'll fight this in court for years. I'll tie up every dollar until you're dead. Run, Helen." I kept my voice steady, controlled. "Justice will catch up with you eventually." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, their presence immediately changing the room's dynamic. Edward gestured toward Helen with professional courtesy. "Please escort Miss Jordan from the building. She's no longer welcome in our offices." As the guards approached, Helen made one final desperate grab for Edward's briefcase, but her expensive heels betrayed her balance. She stumbled, her dignity as shattered Asher's schemes. "This isn't over," she screamed as the guards gently but firmly guided her toward the door. "I'll destroy all of you." The conference room fell silent except for the distant sound of Helen's protests echoing down the corridor. Edward straightened his tie and began gathering the scattered document fragments. "Well," he said with considerable understatement, "that could have gone more smoothly." I sank back into my chair, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. My son had protected me from beyond the grave, and Helen's true nature had been exposed for all to see. The war was far from over, but the first major battle belonged to justice. Edward closed the conference room door and returned to his desk, the professional calm settling back over his office like dust after a hurricane. He methodically arranged the scattered legal documents, his movements precise despite the chaos Helen had attempted to create. "I must apologize for that outburst," he said, straightening his jacket. "In 30 years of estate law, I've rarely witnessed such a violent reaction to testamentary proceedings." She expected to walk away with $40 million. I remained seated, processing the emotional whiplash of the last hour. That's a powerful motivation for delusion. My phone buzzed against the conference table. Tom Riley's name appeared on the screen, and I remembered his promise to complete his automotive investigation. "Tom, what did you find?" "Seth, you need to hear this." His Irish accent carried urgency that made my pulse quicken. This wasn't just sabotage. This was attempted murder with professional-grade execution. Edward looked up from his document organization, clearly hearing both sides of the conversation in the quiet office. "Explain exactly what you discovered." "Your brake lines were cut with surgical precision, not random damage, no amateur work." Tom's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades diagnosing automotive failures. "The cuts were positioned to cause complete brake failure after approximately 10 miles of highway driving. 10 miles, exactly the distance from my suburban home to the downtown expressway entrance, where I'd be traveling 70 miles with no ability to stop." "Are you absolutely certain this was deliberate?" 100%. I've documented everything with photographs and measurements. The tools used were professional grade, and the technique shows advanced knowledge of brake system vulnerabilities. Edward leaned forward, his legal mind immediately grasping the implications. "Tom, this is Edward Reynolds, Seth's attorney. Would you be willing to provide expert testimony about these findings?" "Absolutely. I've preserved all the evidence and prepared a detailed technical report." This kind of sabotage could only be performed by someone with specific automotive knowledge, or someone with access to professionals who possess such knowledge. Helen's expensive lifestyle suggested connections to people willing to perform various services for the right compensation. "There's more," Tom continued. "The steering components were also compromised. Even if the brakes had functioned, the vehicle would have become increasingly unstable at highway speeds." Edward was already taking notes, his pen moving rapidly across a legal pad. "We can use this evidence to support criminal charges for attempted murder. She killed my son and tried to kill me." The words came out flat, emotionless, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Now she pays for both crimes." Tom's technical expertise had provided the final piece of evidence needed to build a comprehensive case against Helen. Combined with Martin's warning and her explosive reaction to the will reading, we had enough material to ensure she faced justice for her crimes. "I'll contact the Cook County District Attorney's Office immediately," Edward said, already reaching for his phone. Between the inheritance fraud attempt and documented evidence of attempted murder, Helen Jordan is going to face serious criminal charges. The afternoon sun slanted through the conference room windows, casting long shadows across the scattered legal documents. Martin's foresight had protected his father's life and preserved his legacy for the causes he truly cared about. Helen's greed had finally met its match in a father's love and a son's wisdom. Justice was no longer just a hope. It was an imminent reality. The next morning brought clarity with the sunrise. With Martin's inheritance secured, I could focus entirely on ensuring Helen faced criminal consequences for her actions. My home office became a war room. Documents spread across every surface like evidence in a detective thriller. Edward had recommended Marcus Chen, a private investigator with 20 years' experience in financial crime cases. We met that afternoon in a downtown coffee shop, his weathered face showing the kind of skepticism that came from seeing too much human greed. "Mrs. Jordan has accumulated substantial credit card debt," Marcus reported 3 days later, sliding a manila folder across my kitchen table. "Over $200,000 in the past 18 months. Luxury purchases, expensive restaurants, designer clothing, all charged while her husband was dying." The financial records painted a damning picture. Helen had been living far beyond their means, apparently confident that Martin's death would solve her money problems permanently. Dr. Sarah Williams, the medical expert Edward had consulted, arrived on the 4th day with her analysis of Martin's medical records. Her expression was grim as she spread laboratory reports across my dining room table. "The symptom progression strongly suggests arsenic poisoning," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who testified in dozens of criminal cases. "The timeline is as textbook gradual accumulation, followed by rapid organ failure." Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in Helen's metaphorical coffin. But the most satisfying discovery came from my systematic canvassing of the neighborhood's security systems. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down had a high-definition camera system that captured the entire street. The footage was crystal clear. Helen's BMW arriving at 11:47 p.m., her figure moving deliberately toward my garage, the tools glinting in the streetlight. "Camera 3 shows her clearly working under your car hood," the security company technician confirmed, freezing the frame at the perfect angle. "Timestamp is exact and the resolution leaves no doubt about identity." By the 5th day, I had assembled an overwhelming case against Helen. Financial motive, means, opportunity, and expert testimony all pointed toward her guilt in both Martin's murder and the attempt on my life. Tom's mechanical analysis remained the crown jewel of evidence. Professional sabotage designed to cause fatal accidents, documented with photographs and technical specifications that would convince any jury. I sat in my study that evening, surrounded by folders containing Helen's financial desperation, medical evidence of Martin's poisoning, security footage of her sabotage attempt, and expert testimony supporting every accusation. My phone buzzed with a text from Edward. "District Attorney wants to meet tomorrow. Bring everything." The legal machinery was finally grinding into motion. Helen had calculated every detail of her murderous scheme except for one crucial factor: a father's determination to seek justice for his son. Martin's warning from beyond the grave had saved my life and exposed his killer. Now it was time to ensure she paid the full price for her crimes. I gathered the evidence files into my briefcase, preparing for what would be Helen's final day of freedom. Helen's house sat in an affluent suburb 20 minutes from downtown Chicago, its manicured lawn and circular driveway showcasing the lifestyle she'd been desperate to maintain. 2 luxury cars gleamed in the morning sun, a BMW and a Mercedes, both likely financed with credit she couldn't afford. I parked across the street and walked deliberately to her front door, carrying the manila envelope that would end her freedom forever. The court documents felt substantial in my hands. Arrest warrants, civil lawsuit papers, and a comprehensive evidence summary that detailed every aspect of her criminal conspiracy. Helen answered the door in an expensive silk robe, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. When she saw me standing on her doorstep, the color drained from her face like water from a broken glass. "What do you want?" Her voice carried a tremor that belied her attempt at confident indignation. Official court summons for attempted murder charges. I handed her the envelope with ceremonial precision. Also included are civil lawsuit documents for inheritance fraud and emotional distress. She stared at the papers as if they were written in hieroglyphics. You can't prove anything. This is harassment. Video footage from 3 different security cameras showing you sabotaging my vehicle. Technical analysis from a certified automotive expert. Medical testimony indicating arsenic poisoning. Financial records showing your $200,000 debt motive. Each piece of evidence hit her like a physical blow. Helen clutched the door frame for support, her expensive facade crumbling in real time. The district attorney has accepted the case for prosecution. I continued with professional calm. Trial date is set for next month. I thought you deserved personal notification. I'll destroy you in court. She stepped forward aggressively, but her silk slippers on the marble threshold made the gesture pathetic rather than threatening. You'll never prove I hurt Martin. Dr. Sarah Williams will testify about arsenic poisoning symptoms. Marcus Chen will present your financial desperation. Tom Riley will explain how professional automotive sabotage works. I kept my voice steady, letting the facts speak for themselves. The evidence speaks quite clearly. Helen's eyes darted around her expensive neighborhood, perhaps calculating whether any neighbors were witnessing her public humiliation. The morning sun highlighted every line of panic etched across her carefully maintained features. You think you've won? Her voice rose to a near shriek. I'll appeal everything. I'll tie this up in court for years. You already destroyed yourself, Helen. This just makes it official. She clutched the legal documents against her chest like armor that might somehow protect her from the consequences of her actions. But we both knew the truth. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing, and no amount of designer clothing or expensive lawyers could rebuild it. Martin warned me about you, I said quietly. I should have listened sooner. Helen slammed the door with enough force to rattle the expensive glass panels. Through the window, I could see her sinking onto the marble floor, still clutching the papers that would send her to prison. I walked back to my car with measured steps, feeling the weight of Martin's presence like a guiding hand on my shoulder. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was an unstoppable legal machine grinding toward its inevitable conclusion. 3 weeks later, Judge Patricia Morrison delivered the verdict that echoed through the packed Chicago courtroom. Helen Jordan, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, without possibility of parole for attempted murder and inheritance fraud. The gavel's final strike marked the end of Helen's freedom and the beginning of true justice for Martin's memory. I stood as reporters surged forward, their questions blending into a cacophony of vindication. Justice has prevailed, I told the gathered media outside the courthouse steps. My son can finally rest in peace knowing his killer has been held accountable. Helen's conviction made headlines across Illinois. The wealthy widow who poisoned her husband and tried to murder her father-in-law became a cautionary tale about greed's ultimate consequences. She would spend the next decade and a half in maximum security, her expensive lifestyle replaced by prison uniforms and institutional meals. But my real satisfaction came not from her punishment, but from transforming Martin's legacy into something positive. The Martin Jordan Cancer Research Foundation launched 6 months after the trial, funded entirely by the inheritance Helen had killed to claim. Your $40 million donation will fund breakthrough research for decades, Dr. Elizabeth Hart announced at the foundation's groundbreaking ceremony. Lives will be saved because of your son's vision and your generosity. Standing before the assembled medical researchers and community leaders, I felt Martin's presence more strongly than ever. His innovative spirit would live on through the foundation's work, protecting others from the disease that made him vulnerable to Helen's poison. I downsized to a comfortable but modest home near Lake Michigan, keeping only what brought genuine happiness. The rest of my energy went toward travel and charitable work, visiting cancer research facilities, meeting with patient families, ensuring Martin's money created hope rather than destruction. Garrett still checked on me regularly. Our friendship deepened by shared experience of neighborhood vigilance saving lives. Tom had become more than a mechanic. He was a trusted ally who'd helped expose attempted murder through professional expertise. Edward handled the foundation's legal affairs, ensuring every dollar reached its intended purpose. We'd built something lasting from tragedy, transforming Helen's greed into a force for healing and discovery. 1 year after the trial, I visited Martin's grave with news of the foundation's first research breakthrough. a promising treatment protocol that might save hundreds of lives annually. "Son, I kept my promise," I whispered to the granite marker bearing his name. "Your killer faced justice, and your legacy helps others fight the battle you couldn't win." From tragedy had come purpose. From loss had emerged hope. Helen's attempt to destroy our family had instead created something beautiful and enduring, a testament to love conquering greed, justice prevailing over evil, and a father's determination to honor Hissen's memory. The inheritance she'd killed for now funded the research that might have saved Martin's life. In the end, that seemed like the perfect form of poetic justice. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.